5 words changed everything between us. Not, I think I love you. Not something profound. Just, I have a date tonight. Said to a man who wasn't supposed to care, except he did. And the next few days were the most entertaining of my life. And if you're already intrigued, you're going to want to stick around, because this one gets good. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the moment everything falls apart. Drop a comment below. Have you ever said something completely innocent and watched someone completely unravel? Because that's exactly what happened here. Raya Mensah did not intimidate easily. She had cooked for diplomats who spoke to her like she was furniture, for celebrities who sent food back untouched on principle, for difficult people who mistook cruelty for standard. She had survived all of them with her edges intact, so when her best friend Zara bet her 6 months of her life that she couldn't survive working a real structured, someone else is the boss job, Raya took the bet, submitted 1 application on a dare, and somehow ended up standing in the private kitchen of Kang Hyun-jae. The man was worth more money than Raya could meaningfully visualize. His sole penthouse had a kitchen larger than her entire previous apartment. The appliances were the kind that came with manuals written in 4 languages and a technician's number. The pantry was stocked with things Raya had only ever sourced herself for specific recipes. She stood in the middle of it on her first morning, turned a slow circle, and thought, okay, she could work with this. What she had not fully prepared for was the man himself. Kang Hyun-jae walked into the kitchen at exactly 7:58, 2 minutes before the time he had specified in the offer letter. He was already in a suit. He looked at the breakfast she had prepared, looked at her, and said nothing for a moment that stretched just long enough to be deliberate. The brief said no garnish. Raya looked at the microgreens she had placed on the eggs. She looked at him. It's microgreens, it's not garnish, it's flavor. The brief said no garnish. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second longer than was professionally advisable. Then she picked up the microgreens with a spoon and set them aside on a small plate. Noted, she said pleasantly. He left without another word. Raya watched him go, then looked back at her small plate of displaced microgreens. She picked one up, ate it, and thought, interesting. She set up her phone behind the fruit bowl that evening and filmed her first video. She didn't show his kitchen directly. She was careful about that, angles and framing, nothing identifiable. She just cooked and talked, the way she always had. Her food content had been building a quiet audience for 2 years. People who came for the recipes and stayed because Raya had a way of talking about food that made it feel like she was talking about everything else too. By the time she went to bed that night, she had 400 new followers and 3 brand inquiry emails she filed away for later. She was here for 6 months. She could be patient. The first week established a rhythm. Hyun-jae was exacting, consistent, and almost entirely without warmth. He communicated his preferences through the household manager, a quiet, efficient man named Director O, and appeared for meals, assessed them, and disappeared. He did not say, thank you. He did not say much of anything. Raya cooked, filmed her evening content, and observed him the way she observed everything, with patience and a great deal of private thought. It was the end of the second week when the rhythm broke. She had made pepper soup. Not for him, for herself. The proper version, her aunt's recipe, the kind that required time and patience and a specific sequence of spices that couldn't be rushed without consequence. She made enough because she always made enough. It was sitting on the stove, covered and warm, when Hyun-jae came into the kitchen at 9 in the evening, which was unusual. He opened the refrigerator, stood there a moment, then turned around. What is that? Pepper soup, Raya said without looking up from her book. A pause. That's not on the approved menu. It's my dinner. She turned a page. You're welcome to it if you want. She heard him move. A cabinet, a drawer, a spoon. She did not look up. A full minute passed in complete silence, and then, the heat, he said. It builds slowly. Now she looked up. He was standing at the counter with a bowl, eating with the focused attention he gave to things that were genuinely holding his interest. That's the point, she said. Most people panic when they don't feel it immediately and keep adding pepper. You have to trust the process. He looked at her over the bowl. And if you trust it, it rewards you, she said simply, and went back to her book. He finished every drop. He washed the bowl himself, which she had not seen him do once before, and left without another word. Raya listened to his footsteps disappear down the hallway and thought, interesting. She sent Zara a voice note that night. I think this is going to be more fun than I expected. 2 months passed. The evenings became a thing without either of them deciding it. Hyun-jae's appearance in the kitchen after 9 had stopped being surprising and started being simply expected. He came with his jacket off and his laptop or a drink, and Raya was there reading or prepping or editing quietly, and neither of them explained it or named it or made it into anything it didn't volunteer to be on its own. They existed in the same space with the ease of people who had quietly stopped performing comfort because the real thing had arrived without asking permission. The conversations deepened gradually. He told her things in the kitchen she suspected he didn't say in boardrooms. Small things, considered things, the occasional thing that surprised even him on its way out. She told him about growing up in her mother's kitchen, about the difference between cooking for people and cooking for yourself, about how you could always tell which one a chef preferred by the way they seasoned. He listened the way he did everything, with complete attention, nothing wasted. She tried sometimes to push past the careful layer he kept between himself and anything too real. She'd ask him something direct, feel him almost step through it, and then watch the temperature drop half a degree and the moment close. It was like watching a door open and shut before you could get your foot in. She filed it under this as just how he is, and kept showing up anyway, because she was curious, purely curious, about the man who remembered she didn't eat coriander after she'd mentioned it exactly once 5 weeks ago. It was a Wednesday evening, 2.5 months in. She was reaching past him for the pepper on the high shelf. He was standing too close to it, absorbed in something on his phone. And when she reached across him, he looked up at exactly the wrong moment, and suddenly the distance between them was not a distance at all. Neither of them moved. His eyes dropped, once, briefly, and came back up to hers, and what was on his face in that moment was something she had never seen there before. Unguarded, certain, very still. Her heart did something she immediately chose not to examine. Then he stepped back, smoothly, quietly, like a door closing on well-oiled hinges. He looked back at his phone. Sorry, he said, his voice completely level. Go ahead. Raya reached past where he'd been standing, got the pepper, and returned to the stove without a word. They finished the evening the way they always did. He stayed another hour. They talked about something she couldn't remember afterward because she was only half present, the other half replaying a fraction of a second on a loop and arriving at conclusions she wasn't ready to say out loud. He showed up the next evening, and the one after that, neither of them, mentioned Wednesday. She said it on a Thursday evening, deliberately, with perfect timing. Hyun-jae had just walked in, jacket off, the evening version of himself arriving the way it always did now, and she was on the phone finalizing details with the gala coordinator, her back to the door, fully aware of the exact moment he entered the kitchen, the way she had become aware of most things that involved him. She wrapped up the call, set her phone down, and reached for the wooden spoon without turning around. Everything all right? He said, settling onto his stool. Yes. She stirred slowly. I have a date tonight. A pause. I mean, Thursday, she continued, completely unbothered. The gala. I've been hired to cater the Jang Foundation event. Another stir. Rico Jang specifically requested me. It's a big night. She did not turn around. She didn't need to. She could feel the quality of the silence behind her shift the way temperature shifts. Subtle, total, impossible to pretend you hadn't noticed. Ibe, he said finally. His voice was level. Perfectly, carefully level. She tasted the sauce, adjusted the seasoning. Do you know him? A beat. We've met. Small world. She reached for the pepper. The brief is extensive. It'll be a long night. Hyun-jae said nothing else. He opened his laptop, and the evening continued the way it always did. Except it didn't. Not really. because something had shifted in the room, and they both knew it, and only one of them was smiling about it. She kept her smile facing the stove. It started the very next morning. Director O appeared at 7:45 with his specific apologetic posture. The one Raya had learned meant Mr. Kang has made a decision that will inconvenience you, and I am sincerely sorry about it. Mr. Kang would like a full review of the household catering calendar, he said carefully. He'd like it completed and presented to him personally, by Thursday evening. Raya looked at him. This Thursday. Yes? I have the Jangala Thursday evening. Director O's expression suggested he was aware of this, and had perhaps mentioned it, and had perhaps been overruled. Mr. Kang thought perhaps earlier in the day, of course. She smiled pleasantly. 8 a.m. I'll have everything ready. Director O looked relieved and slightly suspicious, simultaneously. He left quickly. Raya turned back to her prep work, and began chopping with the slow, steady rhythm of someone who was completely fine and also privately delighted. She completed the catering calendar review at 8:15 a.m. on Thursday, thorough, meticulous, 2 weeks ahead of anything he could reasonably critique. She left it on his desk with a brief note that said, "All yours. See you Monday." Then she went upstairs to prepare for the gala. She had bought the dress 3 weeks ago, before any of this, before the almost Wednesday, before she had fully admitted to herself what she was doing and why. It was red. Deeply, unapologetically red. Structured at the top, fluid from the waist down, the kind of dress that didn't ask for attention so much as simply command it without raising its voice. She had excellent instincts. She trusted them. The Jang Foundation Gala was held in a glass and steel venue in Gangnam that had been designed to make everyone inside it feel like they were being observed from a great height. Raya and her small hired team worked the kitchen with the efficiency of people who had done this before. Courses timed perfectly, presentation immaculate, every plate leaving the kitchen exactly as she had designed it. By 9:30, her duties were complete. She changed in the venue's private room, stepping out of her chef's whites and into the red dress with the focused calm of someone switching registers. She touched up her makeup, checked her reflection once, and walked out into the gala. The room noticed. She was used to rooms noticing. She moved through it with the unhurried ease of someone who had nowhere to be but here, and was perfectly happy about that, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing tray and scanning the room with quiet interest. Rico Jang found her within 4 minutes. He was handsome in the way that men with money and confidence often were. Well put together, socially fluent, the kind of person who made you feel like the most interesting thing in the room when he was talking to you. He was also, Raya noted, not subtle about what he wanted. You, he said, arriving beside her with the ease of a man on his own turf, have completely ruined every other dining experience I will ever have. I hope you know that. Raya smiled. That's the goal. I meant it when I said I want you as the face of the Foundation's culinary program. He tilted his head slightly. I also mean it when I say that's not the only reason I wanted you here tonight. She looked at him steadily. I know, she said simply. He laughed, genuinely surprised by her directness. You're remarkable. I've been told. She sipped her champagne and let him talk. She felt it before she saw it. A shift in the room, not dramatic, not announced, just a subtle recalibration of attention, the way a room adjusts when something unexpected enters it. She turned her head slowly. Kang Hyunjae was standing at the entrance in a dark suit that fit him the way expensive things fit people who don't need them to prove anything. He was speaking to someone near the door, calm, unhurried, perfectly at ease. Like he attended events like this regularly. He did not. She could tell by the way 3 separate groups of people were looking at each other with the particular expression of people confirming they were all seeing the same thing. Kang Hyunjae did not attend Foundation galas. Kang Hyunjae did not do rooms like this. And yet, here he was, working the entrance with the composure of a man who had decided to be somewhere and was not going to make it anyone's business why. His eyes found her across the room. He didn't react. Neither did she. But Rico Ibe, who missed very little, followed her gaze. Something in his expression recalibrated quietly. You know Kang, he said. It wasn't quite a question. He's my employer, Raya said evenly. Interesting that he's here. Isn't it? She agreed pleasantly and sipped her champagne. It was 40 minutes later when she heard it. She was near the edge of the room in conversation with one of the foundation's board members when a woman she didn't know, expensive dress, louder voice than the setting required, said to the person beside her, gesturing in Raya's direction with the carelessness of someone who assumed service staff didn't have ears. She catered the dinner. Janghasa type, apparently. Even imports the help. The conversation around Raya continued. She kept her expression completely still and her eyes forward and took exactly one measured breath. She didn't need to look for Hyunjae. She heard him. I'm sorry. His voice came from just behind her left shoulder. Quiet, pleasant, absolutely frigid. I don't think we've been introduced. The woman turned. Recognition crossed her face immediately. The involuntary straightening that happened when people realized they were suddenly in a conversation with someone whose name appeared on buildings. Kang Hyunjae, he said, not extending his hand. And you are? The woman gave her name. Her voice had dropped considerably. Raya Mensah, he said, as if continuing a natural introduction, is one of the most talented people in this room. She was specifically recruited for this event. A pause so brief it was almost surgical. I'd be careful about the next thing you say. He didn't wait for a response. He moved to stand beside Raya with the calm of someone who had simply crossed a room, not drawn a line in it. The woman found somewhere else to be almost immediately. Raya looked at him. He looked straight ahead, picked up a glass from a passing tray, and said nothing. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. I know, he said. She studied his profile for a long moment. Why are you here, Hyunjae? He turned to look at her then. And she saw it again, what she'd seen on Wednesday evening, unguarded and certain and very still. Except this time he didn't step back. You know why? He said. The room continued around them the way rooms do, glasses clinking, conversation layering over itself, the particular hum of wealthy people performing enjoyment. None of it touched the small, specific silence that had opened up between Raya and Hyunjae in the middle of it. You know why, he had said. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had scheduled phantom meetings and invented calendar audits and shown up to an event he would never normally attend, in a room full of people who were already quietly noting his presence and drawing conclusions. This man who had stepped back from a kitchen counter on a Wednesday evening and pretended the distance between them had been accidental. I want to hear you say it, she said. His jaw tightened slightly. Raya, no. Her voice was quiet, but it had an edge that hadn't been there before. Not anger. Something more tired than anger. Something that had been patient for a long time and was done performing patience. You came here tonight. You did what you did 20 minutes ago. You show up every evening, and you stay and you remember things, and you almost... She stopped. Steadied. You almost said something real once. More than once. And then you don't. So I want to hear you say it, just once, out loud. He looked at her with the expression of a man standing at the edge of something high, calculating the distance down. Rico jangapiered at Raya's shoulder. The timing was either very bad or very good, depending on which of the two men you were asking. I hope I'm not interrupting, Rico said, with the easy confidence of a man who didn't particularly mind if he was. He extended a hand to Hyunjae. Rico Ibe, I don't think we've formally met. We have, Hyunjae said, shaking his hand with the pleasantness of someone who was currently experiencing something very specific and was not going to let it show. 3 years ago. Singapore. Of course. Rico smiled and turned to Raya with the particular warmth he reserved exclusively for her. I wanted to introduce you to a few people before the evening ends. There's real interest in what we discussed. The culinary program, the partnership. A pause that had intention in it. And everything else we discussed. He said it easily, comfortably, in front of Hyunjae, without apology. Raya noted this. Hyunjae noted this. Everyone within a 10-foot radius with any social awareness noted this. Of course, Raya said. She turned to Hyunjae. The question was still sitting in the air between them, unanswered. She let it sit there. "Excuse me." She walked away with Rico and did not look back. She felt Hyun-jae's eyes on her for the next 20 minutes. She knew the quality of his attention by now. She could locate it in a room without looking for it, the way you can feel a weather change before it arrives. She talked to Rico's contacts, smiled at the right moments, said the right things, and felt him watching all of it from across the room with the stillness of someone making a decision. Rico leaned in at one point, his voice low and close. "He's been watching you since you walked away." "I know," Raya said. "Should I be concerned?" She looked at him directly. He was a good man, she thought. Charming, generous, genuinely interested. In another life, in a different kitchen, maybe. "I think you already know the answer to that," she said, not unkindly. Rico was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, the same genuine, surprised laugh from earlier. "He's a lucky man," he said, assuming he figures that out. "He's working on it," Raya said. She found a quiet corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows at the edge of the venue just before 11, the city spread out below in the particular way Seoul arranged itself at night. Ordered, luminous, relentless. She needed a moment. Just one moment outside the performance of the evening, outside Rico's orbit and the room's attention and the weight of Hyun-jae's gaze that she had been carrying for the last hour like something physical. She heard him before she saw him. He came to stand beside her at the window, not touching, not speaking immediately, both of them looking out at the city the way they had learned to exist in the same space, without needing to fill it. "You asked me to say it," he said finally. She didn't look at him. "I did." A long pause. She could feel him working through something. Not finding the words, she knew he had. The words, Hyun-jae always had the words. He was deciding whether to put them down in front of her, whether the exposure was survivable, whether the distance he had maintained for 2.5 months was serving him or just protecting him. "I don't do this," he said. "I know. I don't—" He stopped, started again. "When you said you had a date, I was in the middle of a conference call and I ended it." He said it like a confession. "I ended a $40 million conference call and stood in my office and tried to think of a reason to cancel your evening, and I couldn't come up with a single legitimate one. And that—" A pause. "That was new. That has never happened." Raya was quiet. "I scheduled the calendar audit," he said. "The dinner meeting the week before. The inventory review." He said each one like he was placing evidence on a table. "I am aware of how that looks." "It was funny," she said. He looked at her. "It was embarrassing." "It was both." She turned to face him now, and his expression in the window light was open in a way she had been waiting months to see. Not the fraction of a second unguarded flash from Wednesday, but the full thing, sustained, chosen. "Why did you retreat?" she asked. "In the kitchen. Wednesday." His jaw moved. "Because I didn't know what came after. And now? I still don't know what comes after." He looked at her steadily. "But I know I don't want you to leave tonight with the impression that I don't—" He stopped. The word sat just behind his teeth, and she watched him decide to let it out. "That I don't care about you. Because I do. Significantly. In a way that has made the last 2.5 months the most—" He searched. "The most alive I have felt in a very long time." The city hummed below them. Someone laughed across the room. A glass clinked somewhere behind them. Raya looked at him for a long moment. This composed, defended, quietly unraveling man who had ended a $40 million call and scheduled fake audits and crossed a room at a gala he had no business attending, all because of 5 words she had said while stirring a pot. That, she said, was not so hard. Something moved across his face. Relief, almost. Something that looked a great deal like the beginning of a smile. "It was extremely hard," he said. "I know," she said. "I watched you do it for months." He looked at her with something that was no longer carefully managed or temperature-controlled or held at a professional distance. Just him, looking at her, in a red dress, at a window, in a room full of people who didn't matter at all right now. "What happens now?" he said. Raya considered this with the composure of a woman who had known the answer for longer than she was going to admit. "Now," she said, "I finish my evening, and you go home." His expression shifted, a flash of something. "And tomorrow morning," she continued, "you can make the pepper soup, properly. I'll tell you the full recipe." A pause. "And we'll figure out what comes after from there." He held her gaze. The almost smile became something more certain. "I'll need supervision," he said. "The spice ratio is complicated," she finished. "I know, I'll be there." He nodded once. And for the first time in 2.5 months, neither of them looked away first. He did not make the pepper soup. Raya came downstairs the next morning to find Hyun-jae standing in the kitchen in a gray t-shirt and dark trousers, staring at the stove with the specific expression of a man who had made a decision and was now confronting its practical implications. Every ingredient she had ever used for pepper soup was laid out on the counter in a line, organized, labeled with small pieces of paper in his handwriting. She stood in the doorway and looked at the labeled ingredients for a long moment. "You researched it," she said. "I watched 4 videos," he said without turning around. "They were all wrong." "They're always wrong." She came and stood beside him, looked at his neat little labels, and felt something move in her chest that she chose, for once, not to immediately file away. "You labeled the uziza leaves." "I didn't know what they were." "Most people don't." She picked up the leaf, held it to him briefly. "Smell." He leaned in. His face did the thing it did when something genuinely surprised him. A subtle shift, an opening. "That's the whole point," she said. "That's what makes it. Most people skip it because they don't know what it is." She set it down. "You don't skip things you don't understand. You label them and research them." He looked at her. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." She reached past him for the pot. "Move. I'll talk you through it." They cooked for an hour. He followed her instructions with the same focused attention he gave everything that mattered to him, asking precise questions, adjusting without ego when she corrected him, gradually relaxing into the rhythm of it the way she had watched him gradually relax into the rhythm of their evenings. Slowly, then all at once. At some point, the conversation drifted away from the soup entirely and they were just talking, the way they always eventually ended up just talking, about everything and nothing, and the particular things that only seemed to come out in kitchens after 9, or apparently on Saturday mornings, with uziza leaves and a pot that needed watching. "Rico called this morning," she said, not looking up from the stove. A pause. "And?" "I told him the culinary program was something I'd consider." She stirred slowly. "The other thing I declined." Hyun-jae was quiet for a moment. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said. "I wanted to." Another pause, warmer than the last. "Raya." "The soup needs another 20 minutes, she said pleasantly. "Stop talking and watch the heat." She heard him exhale, something between a breath and a laugh, the specific sound of a man learning that this was simply how she was, and deciding that was entirely fine. The soup was ready by 11. They ate at the kitchen island the way they always did. No formal place settings, just 2 bowls, and the easy quiet of people who had stopped needing noise to feel comfortable. Halfway through his bowl, Hyun-jae looked up at her with the expression she had catalogued as he is about to say something real and has decided not to stop himself. She waited. "I want to take you somewhere," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "Somewhere that isn't this kitchen." She looked at him steadily. "Are you asking me on a date, Hyun-jae?" The word landed between them with the specific weight it had been carrying for weeks. He held her gaze without flinching. "Yes," he said simply. She picked up her bowl, finished the last of her soup, set it down. "Give me an hour," she said. He took her to Bukchon. Not a restaurant, not a private venue, not anywhere that required a reservation made 3 weeks in advance or a name that opened doors. Just Bukchon Hanok Village on a Saturday afternoon. The narrow uphill lanes, the curved rooftops, the particular quality of light that settled over Old Seoul like it had nowhere else to be. He walked beside her without his armor on, hands in his pockets, no suit jacket, no Director O, no approved menu or careful professional distance. He looked, she thought, remarkably like a person. "You've lived in Seoul your whole life," she said, as they climbed one of the steeper lanes, the city spreading out below them in increments. "When did you last do this?" He thought about it genuinely, which she appreciated. "University," he said finally. "There was a girl who liked old architecture." "Did she know you liked her?" A pause. "No," he said. "I wasn't good at saying things then either." Raya laughed. A real one, unguarded, the kind that came from somewhere unperformed. He looked at her when she laughed with the expression of someone storing something carefully. They found a small tteokbokki stall tucked into a corner where the lane flattened briefly, run by a grandmother who did not recognize Hyun-jae and therefore treated him exactly like everyone else, which Raya found magnificent. They stood at the stall eating tteokbokki from paper cups like two completely ordinary people on a Saturday afternoon, and it was, Raya thought, one of the best meals she'd had in months. "This is better than anything in your refrigerator," she told him. "Don't tell my chef," he said. She pointed her skewer at him. "I am your chef." "I know." The almost smile, which had been making more frequent appearances since last night, arrived fully formed. "You're very good at it." "I know that, too." She finished her cup. "What else do you want to do?" He looked at her, unhurried, certain, the way he had looked at her through the gala window, except now there was no performance around them requiring management, no room recalibrating to his presence, no distance being carefully maintained, just a lane in Bukchon and an empty paper cup and the afternoon light doing something generous to everything it touched. "I want to tell you something," he said. She waited. He turned to face her fully, which was new. He usually delivered his real things sideways, to the middle distance, to the counter or the window or the pot. Not this time. This time he looked directly at her with the complete, unmanaged attention he usually reserved for things that cost him something. "I watched your videos," he said. "Before you arrived. Your application came through and I looked you up and I watched, I think all of them. 3 years of content in 2 evenings. A pause. I told my assistant the hire was purely professional. Raya stared at him. "You watched all of them." "Every one. Before I even walked through your door." "Yes." She absorbed this slowly, replaying 2.5 months through a completely different lens. Every evening, every conversation, every careful retreat and deliberate recalibration. He had already known her, some version of her, before she'd said a single word to him. He had already been paying attention before she gave him permission to. "Hyun-jae," she said. "I know," he said quietly. That's a lot." "Yes." He didn't look away. "And I need you to know that every single thing I have felt since you walked into that kitchen has surprised me. Every conversation, every evening, every time you pushed and I pulled back because I didn't." He stopped, found the words, kept going. Because caring about someone that much, that quickly, without a plan for what to do with it, that was not something I knew how to hold. I still don't know how to hold it perfectly. His voice was low and completely steady. But I know that I ended a $40 million call because of 5 words you said while stirring a pot. I know that I have not once in 2.5 months not wanted to be in that kitchen. And I know that last night, watching you walk across that room in that dress, talking to a man who was very clear about what he wanted. A breath. I have never in my life moved across a room that fast. The lane was quiet around them. Somewhere below, Seoul went about its Saturday. Raya looked at him for a long moment, this composed, brilliant, quietly unraveling man who had labeled Uziza leaves and ended conference calls and watched 3 years of her life in 2 evenings, and had just handed her the most honest thing she had ever been given, standing at a tteokbokki stall in Bucheon like it was the most natural place in the world to finally tell the truth. "You know what your problem is," she said. He waited. "You're very good at everything, except letting people see that you are." She stepped closer. "I've been watching you for 2.5 months. I've seen it, all of it. Even the parts you thought you were hiding. She looked up at him. Especially those parts. Something in his face shifted, open and unguarded and completely certain. He reached up slowly and tucked a lock behind her ear with the careful deliberateness of someone who had been thinking about doing something for a long time and was finally doing it. "I'm working on it," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "I'll be patient." He looked at her for one more moment, and then he kissed her. Not urgent, not rushed, certain. The way he did everything that actually mattered to him, with complete attention and nothing wasted. She felt the city tilt slightly on its axis, and thought distantly that she should have pushed harder weeks ago, and that she was extremely glad she hadn't, because this was worth exactly the weight it had taken. When they pulled back, he kept his forehead against hers, eyes still closed, and she could feel him smiling before she saw it. "The soup," he said quietly. "I labeled the leaves." "I saw." She was smiling too now, fully, uncontained. "Very thorough." "I pay attention," he said, "to things that matter to me." She pulled back enough to look at him. "I know," she said. "You always have." Her video went up 3 days later. She was in the kitchen, his kitchen, their kitchen now in some way neither of them had officially named, making pepper soup, her phone propped behind the fruit bowl the way it always was. She talked about patience, about heat that builds slowly, and the mistake of pulling back too early, about trusting the process even when you can't feel it working yet, about the difference between someone who performs stillness and someone who is simply still because they have finally found somewhere worth being. She didn't mention him. She never did. In the corner of the frame, just barely, a pair of hands could be seen setting a bowl on the counter beside her. Just there. Just present. The way they had been for months. Her audience noticed within 4 minutes. The comments filled up overnight. 742 variations of girl we knew, we've been knowing, the pepper soup arc was everything. And one comment, pinned to the top by Raya herself, that simply read, "He labeled the Uziza leaves. I think I'll keep him." And that, Nesties, is how 5 words said over a pot of pepper soup changed absolutely everything. If this story had you smiling, screaming, or ready to go label someone's Uziza leaves, share it with somebody who needs to see it. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and drop a comment below, because I need to know. Would you have waited as long as Raya did, or would you have said something first? Tell me everything. I'll be reading every single one.